The Tesla's engine roared as he floored it. I pounded on the door, screaming in desperation, "Stop! Let me out!" But instead of braking, my cousin deliberately slowed just enough to prolong the torture, then turned to me with a spine-chilling smile. "No one escapes this family. Madison." The leather seats felt like a prison. The locked doors my cage. I didn't know that moment would be the beginning of a revenge plan that would destroy them all. Every betrayal has its price, and they were about to pay in full. My name is Madison Hale, and I've spent 32 years learning that blood doesn't make family. Money does. At least, that's what the Hales taught me. I work as an internal audit specialist at Kingswell Capital, one of Chicago's premier investment firms. It's a position I earned through merit, not nepotism, though you'd never know it from how my family talks. To them, I'm the disappointment who chose spreadsheets over society galas, who preferred financial statements to fashion shows. The Hale family owns a real estate empire worth $380 million. Growing up in our Lincoln Park mansion, I learned early that appearances mattered more than authenticity. My mother died when I was 7, a car accident that left me with fragments of memories. Her lavender perfume, the way she'd tuck my hair behind my ear, how she'd whisper, "My brave girl," when I was scared. After she was gone, Dad buried himself in work, and the house became a museum of what we used to be. Then came Victoria. She swept into our lives 5 years later, all designer heels and calculated smiles. Dad was smitten. She brought her daughter Savannah, 2 years older than me, blonde and beautiful in all the ways that mattered to the North Shore elite. Suddenly, I wasn't just motherless, I was comparison material. Madison doesn't have Savannah's grace, Victoria would tell her friends over champagne brunches, while I sat right there. She's more academic, she'd add, like intelligence was a consolation prize for the genetically inferior. The family dinners were performances. We'd sit around the mahogany table, and Victoria would orchestrate conversations like a conductor, ensuring Savannah's achievements took center stage. Her internship at Vogue, her charity work, her engagement to a senator's son. Meanwhile, my MBA from Northwestern, my CPA certification, my promotion at Kingswell, mere footnotes. But nothing compared to that dinner last March, the one that changed everything. Victoria had invited the Blackwoods, old money, older grudges. She'd been courting them for months, hoping to secure backing for her latest venture. I should have known something was wrong when she insisted I attend. "We need the whole family there," she'd said, though her smile suggested she meant the opposite. Halfway through the main course, Mrs. Blackwood asked about the family business. Victoria launched into her rehearsed speech about legacy and lineage, then paused, wineglass in hand. "Of course, not everyone in the family has the appetite for real business," she said, eyes landing on me. "Madison prefers her little numbers job. Some people just aren't built for the pressure of real wealth management." The table went silent. Even Savannah looked uncomfortable. "I work in forensic accounting," I said quietly. "I investigate financial crimes worth millions." Victoria laughed, that tinkling, dismissive sound I'd grown to hate. "Yes, dear, looking at other people's money, never quite making your own." Mr. Blackwood shifted uncomfortably. "Forensic accounting is quite prestigious." "Oh, we're very proud," Victoria interrupted, her voice dripping with insincerity. "Every family needs someone practical. Madison's always been our little worker bee, haven't you, dear?" I felt the heat rise in my face. 15 pairs of eyes watched as Victoria systematically dismantled my professional achievements, reframing them as quaint hobbies compared to Savannah's entrepreneurial spirit. "At least Madison's consistent," Savannah added with a sympathetic smile that fooled everyone but me. "She's never really aimed higher than middle management." That was a lie. They knew about my pending partnership offer at Kingswell. They knew because I'd made the mistake of sharing it at Sunday dinner, hoping for once to receive genuine congratulations. Instead, Victoria had spent the next week calling my bosses, concerned about the stress I was under. The partnership offer was quietly withdrawn. That night at the Blackwood dinner, as they dissected my inadequacies over creme brulee. I realized something. This wasn't just casual cruelty. This was systematic, deliberate. They were establishing a narrative. Madison Hale, the family failure, the one who couldn't be trusted with real responsibility, the one who shouldn't, inherit anything substantial. I excused myself before dessert, driving home through the Chicago streets with tears blurring the city lights. But by the time I reached my apartment, the tears had dried. In their place, something harder crystallized. They thought I was weak because I didn't fight back. They mistook my silence for submission, but I'd learned something valuable in forensic accounting. The best evidence is collected quietly. The most damaging revelations come from those who think they're operating in shadow. The Hales had built their wall of superiority brick by brick, dinner by dinner, insult by insult. They just didn't know I'd been keeping receipts. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Dad's Tesla had veered off I-94, straight through the barrier, into the concrete median. The police said he died on impact. They also said they couldn't explain why. The vehicle's systems show no mechanical failure, Officer Martinez told me at the morgue. No brake application, no steering correction. It's like he just drove straight into it. But I knew my father. He was meticulous, obsessive about safety. He'd chosen that Tesla Model S specifically for its autopilot features. The toxicology came back clean. The weather had been perfect. None of it made sense. At the funeral, Victoria played the grieving widow perfectly. Black Chanel, understated pearls, tears that fell at precisely the right moments. Savannah held her arm. The dutiful daughter. I stood apart, watching them perform their grief while mine sat like lead in my chest. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. I wasn't expecting much. Dad had always been clear that the business would stay unified, managed by the family trust, but I knew he'd set aside something for me. We'd talked about it just months before, over coffee in his office. "You're the only one who understands numbers like I do. Madison," he'd said. "That's why I'm leaving you 20% of my Kingswell shares. Not the family trust. Directly to you. It's in the codicil." 20% of his Kingswell Capital holdings would be worth roughly $40 million, not enough to challenge Victoria's control of the real estate empire, but enough to secure my independence, enough to matter. But when Attorney Harrison read the will, there was no mention of Kingswell shares, no codicil, just a standard trust distribution that left me with a modest annual income, controlled by Victoria as the executor. "There must be a mistake," I said. "Dad specifically mentioned a codicil about Kingswell shares." Harrison frowned, shuffling through papers. "I have no record of any codicil. Ms. Hale, this will was updated just 6 months ago, and it's quite comprehensive." Victoria's hand touched my shoulder, sympathetic and cold. "Grief makes us misremember things, dear. Your father probably meant to do it, but never got around to it. You know how busy he was." But I'd seen the codicil. Dad had shown me the draft in his home office, had even asked my opinion on the language. It existed, or it had. That night, I went back to Dad's home office. Victoria and Savannah were at some charity function, and I still had my key. The office was too clean, too organized. Dad had been particular. But not like this. Every paper was filed, every surface cleared. It had been sanitized. I searched for hours, finding nothing. Then, behind a family photo, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A receipt from a document shredding service, dated 3 days after Dad's death, the same day Victoria had said she was organizing his papers. Over the next weeks, I dug deeper. I contacted Dad's secretary, Patricia, who'd retired suddenly after his death. "I don't want any trouble," she said when I finally reached her. They gave me a very generous severance. "Patricia, please, something's not right." She was quiet for a long moment. "Your father was acting strange the week before the accident. Nervous. He kept saying he needed to move the codicil to his lawyer's office. He was supposed to do it that Monday. He died Sunday night. I hired a private investigator with my own money. What he found sent chills down my spine. The Tesla's data logs from that night were partially corrupted, professionally, deliberately, but fragments remained. Fragments showing remote access to the vehicle's systems 17 minutes before the crash. Someone was in that car electronically, the investigator told me. They had admin access to the Tesla app. They could have done anything. Disabled autopilot, locked the steering, accelerated remotely. The media started covering the story, but Victoria controlled the narrative. She gave tearful interviews about her husband's recent stress, his long working hours. She mentioned my difficult relationship with him, my struggles with acceptance. Within days, the story shifted from mysterious accident to tragic suicide of an overworked executive. "We need to be strong for each other," Victoria announced at a family meeting. "No more talk of conspiracies or investigations. It's what Robert would have wanted." I watched her performance, Savannah nodding along, and realized the truth. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance, they'd stolen my father, and they'd almost gotten away with it. But I had something they didn't know about. Dad had been paranoid about security after a break-in attempt last year. He'd installed a hidden dashboard camera in the Tesla, one that uploaded directly to his private cloud storage, a cloud account that he'd shared with me for family photos. That night, I logged in and found it. 30 seconds of footage from inside the car. Just before the crash. Dad's face wasn't panicked. It was confused, then terrified. His hands were pulling at the wheel, but it wouldn't turn. His foot was slamming the brake, but the car kept accelerating. And in the background, barely audible over the engine's roar, the Tesla's speaker system was playing a message on repeat. "This is what happens when you don't listen." It was Victoria's voice. 6 months after Dad's funeral, Victoria remarried. Lawrence Carter swept into our lives like he'd always belonged there. Silver-haired, distinguished, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He was a tech entrepreneur who'd made his fortune in autonomous vehicle systems, which should have been my first red flag. "Madison, dear," Victoria announced at the engagement party, "Lawrence is very interested in your work at Kingswell. Perhaps you two should talk." I should have known it was a trap. Lawrence cornered me by the bar, bourbon in hand. "Your stepmother tells me you've been asking questions about your father's estate. Unhealthy questions." "Just trying to understand some discrepancies," I replied carefully. His smile tightened. "Sometimes understanding comes at a price. Let me offer you some advice. Focus on your little job. Leave the family business to family." The threat was subtle but clear. I was being warned off. 3 weeks later, on a rainy Thursday evening, Lawrence appeared at my office building's parking garage. He was leaning against a black Tesla Model S Plaid, identical to my father's except for the color. "Madison," he called out, "I think we need to have a proper conversation. Let me give you a ride home." Every instinct screamed danger, but I needed to know what he knew. I got in. The car smelled of leather and his cologne, something expensive and suffocating. He pulled onto Lakeshore Drive, the city lights blurring past. That's when I noticed his son Blake in the back seat, grinning like he'd won a prize. "You've been busy," Lawrence said, accelerating smoothly. "Private investigators, document requests, even reaching out to Tesla's security team. Very thorough." "I want to know what happened to my father." "What happened?" Lawrence said, merging onto the highway. "Was an unfortunate accident, one that could have been avoided if he'd been more cooperative." The speedometer climbed, 70, 80, 90 miles. "You see, Madison, your father discovered some irregularities in Victoria's financial dealings. Instead of understanding that marriage is about compromise, he threatened divorce. Messy, expensive, unnecessary. 95 pi. My hands gripped the seat. "But you're smarter than him, aren't you?" Lawrence continued. "You understand that sometimes it's better to accept the new order of things." 100 pa. The car's automatic systems kept it perfectly centered in the lane, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "I want out," I said. "Let me out of the car." Blake laughed from the back seat. "She wants out, Dad." Lawrence touched the console screen. The doors locked with an electronic click. the windows sealed. Then he disabled the climate control. Within seconds, the car became a sealed box, the air growing thick and stale. "Your father experienced something similar," Lawrence said conversationally, though his ended more dramatically. I clawed at the door handle. Nothing. The manual override had been disabled. The windows wouldn't budge. Panic rose in my throat as the oxygen thinned. "Stop the car!" I screamed. "Let me out!" Blake leaned forward, still grinning. "Should we slow down, Dad? Let her think she has a chance?" Lawrence eased off the accelerator just enough to drop to 60 mph. "Try the door now, Madison." I yanked the handle. The door cracked open an inch, wind screaming through the gap. Then Blake reached over and pulled it shut, laughing at my desperation. "No one escapes this family, Madison," he said, that spine-chilling smile reflecting in the rearview mirror. The air was getting harder to breathe. Black spots danced in my vision. Lawrence's voice seemed to come from far away. "All you have to do is agree to sign over your rights to any claim on the estate. Simple, clean, everyone walks away happy." "Never," I gasped. "Your choice," Lawrence said, accelerating again. But I'd learned something from Dad's paranoia. I fumbled for my phone, fingers shaking, and triggered the emergency SOS feature. It would send my location to 911 and start recording audio. "You're admitting to killing my father," I said loudly, fighting for each word. Lawrence glanced at me, amused. "Proving it would be difficult. Tesla's systems are remarkably vulnerable if you know what you're doing, and I helped design their security protocols." The phone in my hand was recording everything, but more importantly, the SOS had triggered within minutes. Sirens wailed behind us. Lawrence cursed, immediately slowing down and re-enabling the climate control. Cool air flooded in. "State police," Blake muttered. "Dad, we need to—" "Shut up," Lawrence snapped. He pulled over smoothly, professionally. The locks disengaged. I stumbled out of the car before it fully stopped, gasping, legs shaking. The state trooper approached, concerned. "Ma'am, are you all right? We received an emergency signal." I looked back at Lawrence, who was watching me with cold calculation. "I'm fine. False alarm. My mistake." The trooper looked skeptical, but had no cause to push. After he left, Lawrence leaned out his window. "Smart girl. But this conversation isn't over. You have 1 week to sign the papers Victoria sends you. 1 week, or next time. There won't be any cops to save you." They drove off, leaving me shaking on the highway shoulder. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd admitted everything, and I had it all recorded. The question was, what to do with it? Because Lawrence was right about one thing. Proving it in court would be nearly impossible. But maybe I didn't need a court. Maybe I needed something else entirely. The papers from Victoria arrived the next morning, delivered by private courier. Sign away all claims to the estate, accept a one-time payment of $50,000, and never contact the family again. I had 6 days left. Instead of signing, I started watching. Lawrence and Victoria thought they'd broken me, but fear had sharpened my focus into something dangerous: purpose. I began with research. Lawrence Carter wasn't just rich. He was connected. His company, Carter Dynamics, had contracts with 3 autonomous vehicle manufacturers, but more interesting was his silent partnership in Stonewell Partners, an investment fund that specialized in distressed real estate acquisitions, the same fund that had approached Kingswell Capital about a merger just weeks ago. The pieces started forming a picture, but I needed proof. On day 3 of my deadline, I did something insane. I broke into the family mansion. Victoria and Lawrence were at a tech conference in San Francisco. Blake was in Miami. The house staff had Sundays off. I still had my key. And more importantly, I knew the security codes. Dad had never changed them for Mom's birthday. The main floor revealed nothing unusual. Lawrence's study was clean, organized, boring, but then I remembered something Blake had said once at dinner, bragging about his father's command center, where he controlled all his toys. The basement. Our basement had always been half-finished, used for storage and Dad's old workout equipment. But when I descended the stairs, I found it transformed. The musty storage room was now a high-tech office space, climate-controlled, soundproofed, with multiple monitors and server racks humming in the corner. The door required a key code. I tried the obvious ones: birthdays, anniversaries, nothing. Then, on instinct, I entered the date of Dad's death. The lock disengaged. Inside was Lawrence's real office. The monitors were locked, but the physical files were goldmine enough. Folder after folder of financial records, contracts, correspondence, and there, in a folder marked Kingswell Acquisition, I found the smoking gun. Email printouts between Lawrence and Stonewell Partners, dated 2 months before Dad's death. They were planning a hostile takeover of Kingswell Capital, but they needed the Hale family's shares to make it work. Dad owned 20%. Victoria controlled another 15% through the family trust. Together, it would give them enough leverage to force a sale. But Dad had refused to sell. The emails grew increasingly frustrated, then threatening. Robert remains an obstacle. Alternative pressure required. Lawrence had written. The response from Stonewell's CEO was chilling. Remove obstacles as necessary. Timeline is critical. 2 weeks later, Dad was dead. I photographed everything with my phone, but I needed more. The servers likely contained the digital evidence, the actual Tesla hack, the financial transfers, maybe even recordings of their planning. I found an external drive in the desk and plugged it into the main server. I'm not a hacker, but I didn't need to be. Lawrence had left himself logged in, probably feeling safe in his secret basement kingdom. I started copying everything: emails, financial records, technical specifications, source code. The transfer would take hours. I settled in to wait, reading through more physical files. That's when I found the second revelation: $93 million in offshore transfers, disguised as real estate development costs, but actually funneled through shell companies, tax evasion, money laundering, fraud, the trifecta of federal crimes. The drive was at 47% when I heard the front door open upstairs. Footsteps, multiple sets. They weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow. Check the basement, Victoria's voice, sharp and suspicious. I know that little bitch has been here. Her car was spotted in the neighborhood. I yanked the drive out. Partial data was better than getting caught. But as I turned to leave, I realized the only exit was the stairs they were coming down. I did the only thing I could. I hid behind the server racks, praying the humming would mask my breathing. Lawrence entered first, scanning the room. Nothing seems disturbed. The security log shows the door was accessed an hour ago, Blake said, following him in. Victoria appeared last, her face twisted with rage. She's been here. I can smell her cheap perfume. They searched the room methodically. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, clutching the drive. If they found me here, with this evidence, I wouldn't make it out alive. Dad, Blake said suddenly, pointing at the desk. The server access log. Someone copied files. Lawrence rushed to the monitor, his face darkening as he read. She got into the system. She has everything. How much? Victoria demanded. Enough, Lawrence said grimly. Enough to bury us all. Find her, Victoria snarled. Find her now. She can't have gotten far. They scattered, Blake running upstairs, Victoria checking the garage. Lawrence remained, staring at the servers. Then he did something that made my blood freeze. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Yes, it's me. I need a cleanup team, full sanitization, and I need someone found and contained. Madison Hale. Yes, that priority level. She has materials that cannot go public. He gave my home address, my office address, even my gym. Then he said something that changed everything. Check with our contact at Kingswell first. If she's tried to hide anything in their servers, we need to know, yes, the CFO is ours. He'll cooperate. The CFO of Kingswell, my company, was working with them. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. I waited until Lawrence left, then counted to 100. The house was quiet. I crept up the stairs, made it to the kitchen, then out the back door. I ran through 3 neighbors' yards before reaching my car, parked 4 blocks away. As I drove, hands shaking, I realized I had 72 hours before my deadline, 72 hours to use this information before they found me. But now I knew their weak spot. They weren't just criminals. They were sloppy criminals who'd left a digital trail, and I had just enough of it to start a war they couldn't win. I couldn't go home. They'd be watching. Instead, I drove to a motel outside the city, paid cash, and spread the evidence across the bed like a map of their crimes. But raw data wasn't enough. I needed someone who could decode the technical aspects of the Tesla hack and someone who could weaponize the story. I needed allies. Ethan Ward was a legend in cybersecurity circles, ex-Tesla engineer, whistleblower, now running his own security firm. He'd exposed vulnerabilities in autonomous vehicles that cost companies millions but saved lives. If anyone could prove Lawrence had hacked Dad's car, it was him. I found him at a tech conference downtown, surrounded by admirers. When I approached, he looked through me at first. Another face in the crowd. Then I handed him a USB drive with a partial copy of Lawrence's code. "This is from the Carter hack," I said quietly. "The one that killed Robert Hale." His expression shifted. "That's a serious accusation." "I have proof, but I need your help to verify it." We met later at his office, a converted warehouse in the West Loop. Ethan plugged in the drive, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Within minutes, his face had gone pale. "This is... Jesus," he muttered. "This is a remote access protocol specifically designed for Tesla's 2023 security architecture. It's not just proof of capability. There are execution logs here, timestamps, GPS coordinates." "Can you prove it was used on my father's car?" He pulled up another screen, cross-referencing data. "The vehicle ID matches. The timestamp is 17 minutes before the crash. This is it. This is murder disguised as an accident." "Would it hold up in court?" Ethan leaned back. "With the right presentation, absolutely. But you need more than technical evidence. You need to tell the story in a way people can't ignore." Which led me to my second ally. Sienna Brooks was everything a journalist should be. Relentless, principled, and unafraid of powerful people. She'd won a Pulitzer for exposing corruption in Chicago's construction industry. When I called her from a burner phone, she was skeptical. "Madison Hale, the audit specialist? Why would Lawrence Carter want to kill your father?" "Because Dad wouldn't sell his shares for a hostile takeover. I have financial records, emails, and proof they hacked his Tesla." Silence. Then, "Where can we meet?" We chose a public place, Union Station at noon, surrounded by crowds. I showed her everything. The financial fraud, the murder plot, the money laundering. Her eyes lit up with the fierce joy of a hunter who'd found big game. "This is it," she breathed. "This is career-defining, but we need to be smart. They have resources, connections. If we publish too early, they'll bury it in lawsuits and PR spin." "What do you suggest?" She smiled. "We set a trap, make them think they've won, then expose them when they can't run." Together, we developed Operation Black Swan, named after the unexpected event that brings down markets. Phase 1 was intelligence gathering. Ethan dug deeper into the technical evidence, finding more instances of Lawrence's vehicle hacking, 3 other accidents involving business rivals, all ruled driver error. Sienna investigated Stonewell Partners, uncovering a pattern of forced acquisitions following convenient tragedies. Phase 2 was the trap. I would pretend to cooperate, agree to sign the papers, but request a formal transfer at the next Kingswell board meeting, where all parties needed to be present. Lawrence and Victoria would think it was their victory lap. In reality, it would be their public execution. Phase 3 was preparation. Ethan created an irrefutable presentation showing the Tesla hack. Sienna prepared her exposé, ready to publish the moment we went public. I gathered every piece of financial evidence showing the crime syndicate they'd built. But Lawrence grew impatient. 2 days before my deadline, Blake showed up at my motel. "Hiding doesn't suit you, cousin," he said, leaning against my door. "How did you find me?" Credit card at the gas station nearby. Rookie mistake. He pushed past me into the room. Dad wants to know if you're ready to sign. I need more time. No more time. Sign now, or... He stopped, seeing the papers spread on my bed. His face went white. You stupid bitch. You kept digging. He lunged for the documents. I grabbed them first, but he was stronger. We struggled. Papers flying. He pinned me against the wall, his hand on my throat. You're just like your father, he snarled. Too stupid to know when you've lost. But I'd learned something from our Tesla ride. I triggered my phone's emergency SOS again. The loud alarm startled him, loosening his grip. I kneed him hard and ran. Documents clutched to my chest. Blake chased me through the parking lot, but other guests had heard the commotion. A security guard appeared, hand on his weapon. Everything all right here? Fine, Blake said, breathing hard. Family disagreement. I met his eyes. Tell Lawrence I'll see him at the board meeting. Tell him I'm ready to make a deal. Blake's smile was vicious. You just signed your death warrant. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just signed yours. As he drove away, I called Ethan and Sienna. Move everything to Phase 3. We go public at the board meeting tomorrow. That's ahead of schedule, Sienna warned. Are you sure? I thought of my father, terrified in his final moments, of Lawrence's smug certainty, of Victoria's calculated cruelty. I'm sure. Tomorrow, we end this. The next morning, I walked into Kingswell Capital, knowing I was either about to reclaim my legacy or lose everything. But either way, the truth would finally be told. Lawrence Carter had taught me something valuable in that Tesla. Sometimes, to escape a trap, you have to drive straight through it. The Kingswell Capital boardroom had never felt smaller. 43rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, and every seat filled. Lawrence and Victoria sat across from me, radiating confidence. They thought this was their coronation. Ladies and gentlemen, our CFO, Marcus Fitzgerald, began. We're here to formalize the partnership between Kingswell Capital and Stonewell Partners, including the transfer of certain shareholder assets. I watched Marcus. Knowing now that he was Lawrence's inside man, he avoided my eyes. The Hale family shares, previously held by Robert Hale, will be consolidated under new management, Victoria announced. Madison has graciously agreed to sign over her claims in exchange for a generous settlement. Board members nodded approvingly. The Riverfront Development Project, worth $420 million, would be the crown jewel of the merger. Everyone would profit. Before we proceed, Lawrence said smoothly, I'd like to thank Madison for her cooperation. It shows real maturity, accepting when it's time to step aside. That was my cue. Actually, I said, standing, I'd like to present something to the board first, about due diligence. Victoria's smile faltered. That's not on the agenda. As a senior audit specialist at this firm, I have a fiduciary duty to present material information affecting any major transaction. I clicked the remote, and the main screen lit up. This won't take long. The first slide showed Lawrence's photo beside the Carter Dynamics logo. Lawrence Carter, our potential partner, has impressive credentials, but our investigation revealed some troubling patterns. Lawrence stood. This is inappropriate. Please sit down. Mr. Carter, said Jonathan Kingswell, the board chairman and founder's grandson. Let her speak. I clicked again. Financial records filled the screen. 3 months ago, $93 million was transferred through Carter Dynamics to offshore accounts in Cyprus and the Cayman Islands. These transfers were marked as development costs, but the properties don't exist. Murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus was sweating. Furthermore, I continued, clicking to the next slide, emails between Lawrence and Stonewell. Mr. Carter and Stonewell Partners conspired to acquire Kingswell through hostile means. When my father refused to sell his shares, they decided to, quote, remove obstacles as necessary. This is slander, Victoria shrieked. You have no proof. I have his code, I said simply. Ethan's analysis filled the screen. Lines of programming, timestamps, vehicle identification numbers. This is the remote access protocol Mr. Carter used to hack my father's Tesla on January 15th. He disabled the steering, locked the brakes, and accelerated the vehicle into a concrete barrier. The room erupted. Board members shouted questions. Security moved toward the doors. Lawrence stayed calm, too calm. This is desperate fabrication from a disturbed woman trying to contest her inheritance. I have video, I interrupted. The room fell silent. I played the dashcam footage from Dad's hidden camera, his terrified face, his hands fighting the wheel, and Victoria's voice through the speakers. This is what happens when you don't listen. Victoria went white. That's doctored. Tesla's authentication confirms it's genuine, Ethan said, entering the room with 2 FBI agents. We've verified every bit of data. But Lawrence was smiling. Why was he smiling? Interesting presentation, he said. But you've forgotten something crucial. Marcus? The CFO stood, pulling out a document. Madison Hale has been under investigation for embezzlement. We have evidence she's been siphoning funds. Funds he helped you steal, Sienna Brooks said, entering with her camera crew. We've been live streaming this entire meeting, 20 million viewers and counting. Lawrence's smile vanished. You can't. Check your phones, Sienna said. Every board member's phone was buzzing. The story was everywhere. Live. Tech mogul exposed for murder in Kingswell boardroom. The video of Victoria's threat was going viral. The financial crimes were trending. The FBI evidence was public. Lawrence lunged for the door, but the agents blocked him. Lawrence Carter, you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, wire fraud. This isn't over, he screamed as they cuffed him. You don't know who you're dealing with. Victoria tried to run, but security held her. Blake, who'd been quietly edging toward the exit, was caught by the second team of agents Ethan had stationed outside. But the crescendo was yet to come. Mr. Fitzgerald, I said, turning to Marcus, would you like to explain your role, or should I show the board the records of your kickbacks? Marcus collapsed into his chair. They threatened my family. No, I said, clicking to his bank records. They paid you $3 million. Jonathan Kingswell stood slowly, his face granite. I believe we need to vote. All in favor of immediately terminating our relationship with Stonewell Partners and pursuing full prosecution? Every hand raised. All in favor of reinstating Madison Hale's rightful inheritance and appointing her to the board? Every hand again. Lawrence was dragged past me, and he hissed, You've destroyed everything. No, I replied. I've revealed everything. There's a difference. As they were led out, I saw Victoria's perfect composure finally crack. She was sobbing. Real tears this time. Blake looked young and scared. The arrogant smile finally gone. The boardroom slowly emptied until only Jonathan Kingswell and I remained. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. He always said you were the smartest one in the family. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about Dad. He knew something was wrong. He tried to protect the company, and it cost him everything. But you finished what he started, Jonathan said. The company is safe. Justice will be served. As I left the boardroom, Sienna caught my arm. This story will win another Pulitzer, but more importantly, it'll prevent this from happening to anyone else. Ethan was waiting by the elevator, grinning. That felt good, didn't it? Using their own arrogance against them? It had felt good, but more than revenge, it felt like justice. Lawrence and Victoria had built their empire on the assumption that power meant impunity, that wealth meant immunity. They'd forgotten that truth, properly presented, was the greatest power of all. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within 12 hours, Carter Holdings had lost 70% of its value. Investors fled like rats from a burning ship, but I wasn't done. The evidence I'd presented was just the opening salvo. Now came the real destruction. Outside the Kingswell building, news vans lined the street. Reporters thrust microphones at anyone exiting. Lawrence's black Tesla still sat in the executive parking garage, abandoned like a monument to his hubris. "Madison," Ethan called from across the plaza. "You need to see this." He held up his tablet, showing security footage from the parking garage. Lawrence's Tesla was moving, by itself. "That's impossible," I said. "Lawrence is in custody. Someone's accessing it remotely. Same protocol he used on your father." We ran to the garage, Sienna and her camera crew following. The Tesla was rolling slowly toward the exit ramp, its lights flashing erratically. "Can you stop it?" I asked Ethan. "I'm trying, but—" His fingers flew across his tablet. "Someone's fighting me for control." The car suddenly accelerated, tires screaming. It burst through the garage barrier and onto the street, narrowly missing pedestrians. Then it careened across traffic, jumped the curb, and slammed directly into the massive LED billboard across the street, the one displaying Carter Holdings' logo. The impact was devastating. The Tesla's front end crumpled, the billboard sparked and went dark, the Carter Holdings sign falling in pieces onto the wreckage. Every news camera captured it. The symbolism was perfect. Too perfect. "Did you—" Sienna started. "Not me," Ethan said, then grinned. "But whoever did it used Lawrence's own backdoor protocol. Poetic justice." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Madison Hale?" The voice was electronically distorted. "Consider that a gift. Lawrence Carter destroyed your father with his technology. Now his technology has destroyed him." "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching. Someone who knows there are more Lawrence Carters out there. Check your email." The line went dead. I opened my email to find dozens of files. Evidence of similar murders disguised as Tesla accidents across the country. A network of tech executives and investors using vehicle hacking for corporate assassination. "This is huge," Sienna breathed, reading over my shoulder. "This is a conspiracy that goes way beyond Chicago." But there was more immediate satisfaction to be had. The local news had gone live with the Tesla crash, and the footage was already viral. "Carter's Tesla destroys own company" sign ran across every screen. The memes were instant and brutal. My phone rang again. Victoria, calling from custody. "You think you've won?" Her voice was raw, desperate. "You don't understand what you've started. Lawrence has partners. People who won't let this stand." "Let them come," I said. "I have everything, every email, every transfer, every line of code. If anyone tries to retaliate, it all goes public." "You little—" I hung up. There was nothing left to say. That evening, the SEC announced a full investigation into Carter Dynamics and Stonewall Partners. The FBI expanded their probe to include the other suspicious deaths Ethan had identified. By morning, 3 more arrests had been made. But the best moment came when I returned to the garage to retrieve my car. Blake's Lamborghini was being loaded onto a repo truck, seized as evidence. He stood there watching, no longer the arrogant prince of the family empire. "Madison," he called out, his voice breaking. I didn't know about your father, I swear. I thought it was just about money." I studied him. 25 years old, raised in privilege and corruption, taught that power meant taking whatever you wanted. "You held me in that car while I begged to escape," I said. "You laughed while I couldn't breathe. You knew exactly what you were doing." "I was following orders." So were the Nazis, still guilty. The repo truck drove away with his car. Blake would lose everything. His trust fund. Frozen. His inheritance. Seized. His future. Destroyed. He'd spend the next decade in federal prison at minimum. As I drove home that night, I passed the ruined billboard. Workers were already cleaning up the Tesla's wreckage, but the image would live forever online. Lawrence Carter's own weapon turned against him. His company's symbol destroyed by the very technology he'd used to kill. Sienna called as I parked. "The story just passed 50 million views. News networks worldwide are picking it up. You're trending in 17 countries." "Good," I said. "Let everyone see what happens when you think technology makes you untouchable." "There's more," she said. "Other victims' families are coming forward. People who lost loved ones in suspicious Tesla accidents. You've started something, Madison, a reckoning. I thought about Dad, about that last terrified moment in his car. He'd never see justice served, but his death wouldn't be forgotten or unavenged. That night, I stood in my apartment, looking out at the city lights, somewhere in Federal Holding. Lawrence was probably still raging, still planning, still believing his connections could save him. Victoria was probably weeping, mourning not her crimes but her capture. Blake was learning that actions had consequences money couldn't erase. The Carter Empire hadn't just fallen, it had been obliterated, and everyone involved in their network of corruption was running scared, knowing they could be next. My phone lit up with a message from Jonathan Kingswell. "Board meeting tomorrow. We're voting on your promotion to Chief Compliance Officer. It's time Kingswell had someone who can't be bought." I smiled. The Hales had tried to bury me. Lawrence had tried to terrorize me. They'd all forgotten one crucial thing. I was my father's daughter. And we don't break. We break through. Tomorrow, rebuilding would begin. Tonight, I'd savor the sight of that Tesla embedded in the Carter Holdings sign. A perfect metaphor for justice served at 100 miles per hour. 6 months later, I stood at the podium in Kingswell Capital's conference center, addressing a room full of attorneys, victims' families, and survivors of corporate violence. The Phoenix Foundation, I announced, will provide free legal representation and forensic investigation for families who suspect their loved ones were victims of technology-enabled corporate murder. The applause was thunderous. In the front row sat Patricia, my father's former secretary, tears streaming down her face. She'd become our first major donor, contributing her entire severance package, the blood money Victoria had paid for her silence. Lawrence Carter got life without parole. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours. When the verdict was read, he'd stared at me across the courtroom, his eyes dead, defeated, the master of technology brought down by his own digital footprints. Victoria received 25 years for conspiracy and fraud. Her designer suits replaced with orange jumpsuits, her perfectly styled hair now gray at the roots. The last time I saw her, at sentencing, she'd aged a decade in 6 months. Blake took a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for testifying against his father. He'd broken down on the stand, admitting to everything, including 2 other vehicle hacking incidents we hadn't known about. His testimony sealed Lawrence's fate. Marcus Fitzgerald, our corrupt CFO, got 10 years and was banned from ever working in finance again. The other Stonewell Partners executives fell like dominoes, each racing to make deals, to point fingers, to save themselves. None succeeded. But today wasn't about them, it was about the future. My father once told me, I continued, that money is just a tool. It can build or destroy, heal or harm. The Carter Empire used it as a weapon. Today, we transform it into a shield. The Phoenix Foundation launched with $50 million in funding, $40 million from my restored inheritance and the recovered assets, $10 million from donations. Ethan Ward joined as our Chief Technology Officer, developing software to detect vehicle hacking and other forms of digital assassination. Sienna Brooks headed our media division, ensuring no victim's story went unheard. After the ceremony, Jonathan Kingswell approached me. At 73, he'd decided to retire, but not before ensuring Kingswell Capital's future. "The board has voted," he said. "Unanimous decision. You're our next CEO, Madison, youngest in the company's history." I thought about refusing. The position came with enormous pressure, endless scrutiny. But then I remembered Dad's words. Power isn't about what you can take, it's about what you can protect. "I accept," I said. That evening, I visited Dad's grave for the first time since the funeral. I'd been too angry before, too focused on revenge. Now, I could finally grieve. "We got them, Dad," I whispered to the headstone. "Every last one of them." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice. "My brave girl." A year ago, I'd been nobody, the forgotten daughter, the family disappointment, the one who didn't matter. Lawrence and Victoria had tried to erase me, just as they'd erased my father. They'd believed wealth made them untouchable, that technology made them gods. They'd learned the truth too late. Every keystroke leaves a trace. Every transaction creates a trail. And every crime, no matter how sophisticated, carries consequences. The Phoenix Foundation's first case came the next week. A tech executive in Seattle whose business partner had died in a suspicious smart home malfunction. We took it pro bono. Within a month, we'd uncovered evidence of murder. Another predator fell. Standing in my new office, Dad's old office, I looked out at the Chicago skyline. The Carter Holdings building across the street was being demolished, replaced with affordable housing. The LED billboard where Lawrence's Tesla had crashed now displayed a memorial to corporate crime victims. Blake wrote me a letter from prison, a single line. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late. Victoria tried to appeal, claiming mental distress, manipulation by Lawrence. The judge reviewed the dashcam footage of her voice threatening my father. Appeal denied. Lawrence never stopped fighting, filing motion after motion from his cell. Each one failed. His technology empire was liquidated, the assets distributed to victims' families. His patents were released to the public domain. His legacy was erased. But mine was just beginning. The Phoenix Foundation expanded nationally, then internationally. We exposed 17 more cases of vehicle hacking murders, leading to 53 arrests. We developed legislation requiring automotive companies to implement unhackable manual overrides. We saved lives. 3 years later, when Time magazine put me on their cover, the woman who killed corporate assassination, I thought about that night in Lawrence's Tesla, gasping for air, certain I would die. Blake had said no one escapes the family. He was wrong. I hadn't escaped. I'd conquered. I'd taken their weapons and turned them into tools of justice. I'd transformed their blood money into a force for good. I'd written a new ending to our family story. The Hale name now meant something different, not old money privilege or corporate power, but justice, protection, and the fundamental truth that Lawrence Carter never understood. Technology amplifies who we are. In the hands of the corrupt, it becomes a weapon. In the hands of the righteous, it becomes salvation. My name is Madison Hale. I'm 35 years old. I run a multi-billion-dollar investment firm and a foundation that saved hundreds of lives. And I am my father's daughter. The brave one. The one who survived. The one who won. Thank you so much for listening to Madison's story of justice and triumph. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story of courage against corruption moved you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Madison's position? Let me know in the comments.